Welcome to this explainer, where we're going to explore one of the absolute greatest medical hoaxes in history, and honestly, the terrifying biology of the pathogen that made the whole thing possible. Today, we're unpacking a story that kicks off with an ingenious deception during World War II, and then drills all the way down into the microscopic warfare happening right inside human cells. We're going to look at how a deadly disease was actually used as a shield, the incredible scientists who literally gave their lives studying it, and the fascinating, almost villainous way this bacteria hijacks our bodies. So, let's jump right in. Okay, to really set the stage, let's look at the timeline of how two Polish doctors engineered a fake epidemic to completely terrify the German military. When World War II broke out, the German army was hyper-aware of typhus. They knew that, historically, it often killed way more soldiers than actual combat, so they avoided it at all costs. Well, during this time, a physician named Dr. Eugene Lazowski actually escaped a German concentration camp by scaling a wall and sneaking a ride in a horse cart back to his hometown of Razwado, Poland. And it was there that he and his colleague, Dr. Stanislaw Matulewicz, hatched this brilliant plan. Their fabricated typhus outbreak successfully kept the German army away, which ultimately saved an estimated 8,000 people from harsh imprisonment and probable death. You might be wondering, how on earth did they pull that off? Well, they did it by tricking a standard diagnostic tool called the Weil-Felix test. You see, the actual typhus organism is incredibly difficult to cultivate in a lab setting, but fortuitously enough, there's a completely unrelated, mostly harmless bacterium out there called Proteus OX19. And this bacterium contains an antigen that is a perfect, identical match to one found in the deadly typhus organism. By injecting killed cultures of this harmless bacteria into healthy patients, the doctors triggered a biological cross-reaction. When those patients' blood was eventually tested, it showed a massive positive result for typhus, even though they didn't actually have the disease. The doctors fudged the records, produced the positive lab tests, and successfully convinced the Germans that Razwadal was this highly infected hotbed. But here's where things get really interesting, ethically speaking. The doctors never sought informed consent from their patients. They just couldn't risk it, because if anyone leaked the truth, the entire town would be jeopardized. Plus, the killed Proteus OX19 they used wasn't totally without side effects. It contains a lipid that can actually make a person feel pretty sick, giving them chills and a fever for a couple of days before it spontaneously goes away. Now, in today's medical world, the idea of administering a fever-inducing bacteria without a patient knowing about it seems completely unthinkable, right? But remember, this was Poland in the middle of World War II. These doctors prioritized the greater good, saving thousands of people from the camps, and put standard ethical considerations of consent entirely to the side. Now, to really understand why the military was so deeply afraid of this disease, we need to know what typhus actually does. The name itself comes from the Greek word typhos, which translates to foggy or hazy. And that's not a coincidence. It's a direct description of the horrific mental state patients experience when they're in the full throes of the infection. The extreme high fever and brain inflammation plunge the victim into a deep, intense delirium. The German military wasn't just afraid of getting a bad fever. They were terrified of an uncontrollable scourge that essentially stripped soldiers of their sanity right before killing them. Also, I want to quickly separate it from typhoid because the two get confused all the time thanks to their similar names. While both of these diseases absolutely thrive in environments of filth, extreme deprivation, and a total breakdown of hygiene, they come from entirely different sources. Typhoid comes from consuming contaminated food or water. Typhus, which is the whole focus of our explainer today, originates from something else entirely, the body louse. Unlocking the secrets of this specific disease was incredibly dangerous work. In fact, it claimed the lives of the very researchers who were desperately trying to cure it. The organism that causes typhus is super weird. It is technically a bacterium, but it acts almost exactly like a virus because it can only reproduce while it's inside an animal cell. Millions of years ago, it adapted to infect insects and then eventually mammals. So uncovering this microscopic killer required scientists to work right in the direct path of deadly outbreaks, which tragically turned several brilliant minds into martyrs of discovery. One of those incredible minds was Dr. Howard Taylor Ricketts. He was a pathologist from Ohio with a real yearning for investigative fieldwork. He actually started out studying Rocky Mountain spotted fever in Montana, proving it was spread by ticks, which laid the entire foundation for understanding insect-borne bacterial diseases. But his dedication literally cost him everything. While he was actively investigating a typhus outbreak down in Mexico City in 1910, he made the massive discovery that human lice spread the disease. But tragically, he contracted it himself during his work, and he passed away. He was only 39 years old when the disease took his life. It was a brilliant career cut absolutely devastatingly short. And then, just 5 years later, history basically repeated itself. Another fascinating scientist, a zoologist and naturalist named Stanislas von Proazak, was sent out to investigate a typhus outbreak in a Russian prisoner of war camp near the Polish border in 1915. He too contracted the disease while trying to understand it, and he suffered the exact same fate as Dr. Ricketts. Now, Prowazek's colleague, Dr. Henrique de Rocha-Lima, actually contracted the disease in that very same camp. But miraculously, he survived it. He went on to finally completely describe the bacterial cause of the disease. And in a really touching tribute to Prowazek's sacrifice, and building on the earlier foundational work of Dr. Ricketts, he named this odd virus-like bacterium Rickettsia prowazekii. As we mentioned, it's an obligate intracellular bacterium, which just means it simply cannot grow or reproduce outside the cells of an animal host. So how does this actually translate into a human infection? Well, it's truly gruesome. It involves the body louse, and just to be clear, this is different from head lice. Body lice dwell exclusively in filthy clothing, not in human hair. But here is the wildest part. It is not the louse's bite that actually infects you. The organism grows inside the midgut of the louse itself. When the louse feeds on a person, it defecates. The bite itself causes severe itching, and when the human scratches that itchy bite, they are unknowingly pushing the infected louse feces directly into the microscopic open wounds in their own skin. I know it sounds super inefficient, but think about crowded, deprived conditions where washing clothes in warm water just isn't an option. Under those conditions, a single person can easily be infested with hundreds of lice, making transmission horrifyingly rapid. Once it gets inside the human body, this bacterium turns into a straight-up, microscopic action movie villain. It specifically prefers to attack the endothelial cells that line our blood vessels. It latches on using an outer membrane protein called OMP-B. Now, the human cell obviously tries to defend itself by trapping the invader inside a little sac called an endosome. But the bacteria just produces an enzyme called phospholipase D to literally blast its way out of the cellular trap. And then it does something incredibly diabolical. It actually destroys the host caspases. Those are the agents that normally allow a heavily damaged cell to self-destruct. By hitting the brakes on cell death, the bacteria forces the host cell to stay alive, using it as a helpless incubator while it massively reproduces using the host's own amino acids and carbohydrates. The organism just rapidly multiplies and multiplies until the host cell is so full it physically bursts. That floods the bloodstream with millions of new bacteria, which are then perfectly positioned to go infect the brain, the liver, and the lungs. This widespread, systemic destruction of blood vessels causes horrible clots and fluid leaks, leading to a truly terrifying mortality rate. If someone gets this and is left untreated by modern antibiotics, about 12.5% of cases, that's 1 in 8 people, will die from the infection. Because the bacteria invades the cells directly, the body panics and responds by sending immune cells to attack its own infected tissues. This releases massive amounts of inflammatory signals. The sheer volume of the bacteria basically triggers your immune system to go into overdrive, causing what's known as a cytokine storm. After an 8 to 10-day incubation period, the patient gets hit with alternating high fevers and chills, an excruciating headache, and that signature terrible mental fog. The muscle pain is so incredibly severe that in parts of Africa, the illness is actually called sutama, which describes the physical crouching position victims have to assume just to deal with the agony. And by day 4, a telltale rash appears on the abdomen as the blood vessels right in the skin are invaded. Now, epidemic typhus, the one caused by Rickettsia prowazekii and spread by body lice, is what caused all that historical devastation we've been talking about. And incredibly, that epidemic form can actually lie completely dormant inside a surviving patient for years, sometimes re-emerging decades later as Brill-Zinsser disease. But we also need to understand the modern threat because there's an endemic form of typhus as well. This one is spread by fleas, and it's caused by a closely related species called Rickettsia typhi. While it's generally a lot more benign than the epidemic form, make no mistake, it is still a highly significant disease today. And if you're thinking this is just some relic of World War II, think again. In late 2018, there was an outbreak right inside the Los Angeles Civic Center. What happened was rats basically invaded the building, and they brought infected fleas right in with them. Those fleas got embedded in the carpeting, and several municipal employees ended up being infected with endemic typhus. It perfectly proves that this pathogen can easily emerge right in the middle of our modern bustling cities if basic sanitation and pest control ever fail. So as we wrap up this explainer, we're looking at a disease that quite literally shaped wars, claimed the lives of the brilliant scientists who tried to study it, and has this absolutely terrifying ability to manipulate human cells from the inside out. It's just incredible to think that Drs. Lazovsky and Matulowicz were able to use the profound fear of this microscopic villain to save thousands of real lives. But looking at things like that 2018 LA outbreak, it definitely leaves us with a lingering question. If a single bacterium can trick an entire army, completely hijack our cells, and hide right in our office carpets, what other ancient microscopic scourges are just patiently waiting for our hygiene to slip? Thank you so much for exploring the science and history of this fascinating topic with me.